Hi there, listeners. Please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. It does make a difference and helps others find the podcast. Thanks. Welcome to Not Suitable for Work. I'm your host, Peter C. Diamond. You think your office is nuts? Wait until you hear some of these stories.
It's a story I tell people as a cautionary tale of what not to do in a pressure-filled situation.
It gets to a spot where I think I'm making this connection, but what I'm not attuned to is maybe this has become a little bit too much of a visual demonstration.
What about our professional dynamic has given you a license to act in this way?
I realized she's kind of a mean girl.
With each podcast, I interview folks who have a humorous work story to share. Along the way, I'll offer advice to help you make sense of your own office nonsense. Don't worry, no careers were harmed in making Not Suitable for Work. Names and places may have been changed to protect the not so innocent. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. My guest is Dave Mowers. His career takes a 180 when a devil-may-care decision takes him across country to pursue a career he has no experience in. This small detail doesn't dissuade him as he throws caution to the wind and jumps in feet first. He does have one ace up his sleeve.
I'm a person who starts over all the time. I've had 5 careers in my life, and I was thinking about the time that I started over and became a television director in Hollywood. I had been a theater director for maybe 20 years by the time this happened, and mostly I was very happy doing that. I was a working director, and I went to the garden spots of America, like Wilmington, Delaware, and Rochester, Michigan, all the garden spots, the hot spots of theater. But I built, really strong relationships with the artists that I worked with. And so I found myself at a wedding in downtown Detroit with an actress friend of mine who turns out was 7 months pregnant at the time, getting married. And she had purchased this wedding dress on Craigslist, and it didn't quite fit, and she had kept it in a plastic bag in her trunk. So that's a long way to say I had to steam out every single wrinkle from this dress that barely fit her. As I was steaming it out on the floor in the dressing room, her maid of honor was there with her husband, and her husband was actually a really successful television producer. So he was on a cell phone. It was a big cell phone because this was a long time ago. And he was marching up and down the hallway, and he was trying to cast his pilot that was coming up. And he needed the names of some New York actors that they could bring in. And so while I was on my hands and knees steaming out this dress, I just shouted out names of actors. And he kept looking at me like, who are you? Who are you? And so finally, I gave him the name of people that he could use. The casting director in LA was like, those are genius suggestions. And in fact, they used one of the guys that I suggested. He hung up the phone and he said, you ever thought about working in television? And I was like, sure. For 20 years, I've been steaming out wedding dresses on my hands and knees. I'd love to direct television.
And did any of these people know what you were doing in the past? Or were you just like this guy, helping out a friend, steaming out her wedding dress? I mean, did they know what you were doing? Or
right, the only person in the room who knows that I'm a genius director is this pregnant bride who I'm steaming out her wedding dress, right? And
is she kind of cracking up about it? I mean, or is she just is she just worried about her own dress?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say, she's making the worst mistake of her life. So she was busy thinking of something else. But, she did say to him, oh no, Dave's the best director I've ever met. He's better with actors than anyone in the whole world. So this guy, Michael, says, well, listen, if this show gets picked up, you can come and work on it. And I was like, oh, that's great. Sure. Right. Because thinking, people say that kind of thing all the time. Right? It's like,
and whoever.
Let's have lunch. Oh, you'll come on set. Right. I'm like, yeah. Right. For 20 years, I've been steaming things out on the floor. Sure enough, I get a phone call from him and he says, I don't know if you remember, but I met you at Linnea's wedding and my show got picked up. Do you want to come and work on the season? What would you like to do?
And so other than throwing out some names, not
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not.
I mean, I was good.
You were good. You're throwing out really good names, but he had never seen really any of your work or anything, and it's kind of like sight unseen. He's okay,
Right? Hollywood lesson number 1, it's not what you did, it's who you know.
okay.
Right? I get introduced to the right guy, he can hire me, so he does, right? So I show up, I find some friend's apartment I can live in, and I show up in Los Angeles, and I walk on for my first day in New York.
Now, in the meantime, have you
In Hollywood, yeah.
right? So all your did you like at this time? Are you like washing your hands of like New York in theater? Are you just kind of like, okay,
That's a great question. I would never have thought that I was leaving the theater. Never. Because I loved working in the theater. But I will tell you, I was at a place in my life where I found my work in the theater boring. Like, I had the real painful sense that even though I'm so lucky and I get to direct a play and I get paid for it and I've got great talent and I've got a real New York audience watching me, I was bored. I was really bored, and I was always angry, and all I wanted was the next thing, the next thing. So I knew that theater was at a tipping point for me. And because I'm smart and funny, people always said, you should go to Hollywood. You should direct TV. You should go to Hollywood. You should direct TV. But nobody ever helped me, right? And then finally one guy said, go.
And just how long were you director in New York for? Like how many?
I think that I would say at that point, I had been making plays in New York and around the country and around the world, actually, for 18 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah. I was really a New York theater director. Okay. So, if you're a listener and you can't see me, like, I'm an old man now. At the time, I was in the prime of my life, right? I was a brilliant young genius in my early 30s.
Right. But 18 years, I mean, that's it's a lot of time to be in a career.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, all right, so what's next?
Right. So I also like this Hollywood lesson of it's who you know is the whole thing. The other piece is like when you show up, you have to know what you're doing, right? Like I'm a good director, so I knew I could walk onto a set and do it, right? They'll find out in an hour and get rid of you, and that's the story that I want to tell you about. Is how someone got rid of me. So I showed up on this show. It was a show for the WB. And it featured a really famous television comedian. She had been part of one of the most successful ensembles of all time, and it was her chance to come back as a leading actress on her own show. So they were building this whole thing around her on the WB network, and this guy who hired me in, it turned out he was a real deal producer. So he had 20 years of producing hit shows, things like Murphy Brown, right? Things you would know on television. So all of a sudden I'm walking into this high, it's a real thing. And I hesitate to say it, but the show is not that good. And almost everyone knows it, right? But they're all giving it their best, and this is Hollywood lesson number 1, right? It's or lesson number 2, I guess we're at now. Don't mention how bad it is. Do your job and hope it works out, right?
Really? So
yeah.
You clamped, nobody says no one, the elephant's in the room, but no one acknowledges it.
That's right. And so I get brought in to be the director's assistant, and I'm going to shadow for several weeks, and then I'm going to have my own episode to direct, right? Out of nowhere, I'm suddenly a television director. I'm going to direct episode 11. But for the next 10 weeks, I'm going to follow around the directors to learn how they do it. And because this guy is really highly placed, he owns the show, he gets to decide that, and everyone has to do what he says, right? So I'm also having this experience of, as I go around through Los Angeles, every time someone says, what are you doing? I say, oh, I'm doing this today, and I'm going to direct episode 11. Everyone keeps saying, how did you get that? How did you get that? How did you get that? And the truth is, I just got passed from nice person to nice person who wanted to help me, right? So while I'm training and watching this guy do his work and looking at how this actress works and really learning what television acting is, they also say, hey, do you want to shadow on another show? And I find myself watching Jim Brooks on Will and Grace, right? I'm watching the greatest television cast ever. And then I get passed to another show, and I get to like be an acting coach for Reba McEntire on her show, and I'm working with her. And
so is there like, when I'm curious, so everyone's kind of like, how did you get this? Now, is there animosity building from certain people around you who is this, like, we've all been toiling here, and now who's this guy, this New York theater guy who's been promised to do episode 11?
Episode 11 is mine.
It's mine. I own it.
Well, listen, it's show business and it's Los Angeles. So is there animosity? Probably. The most hostile thing you can say in Los Angeles is, have a nice day. Right? Like, that's when people say that to you, they're trying to kill you. Right? So there was probably animosity and hostility. And again, like, generally it was because of who introduced me. Everyone decided to play along, right? So like, if this guy's going to give me episode 11 and he's their boss, they follow along and they say like, sure, you can have episode 11. Can I have episode 12? Right? Can you help me? So I got passed around like a social disease in Hollywood for 10 weeks, and getting job after job that was better and better and better, making more money each week also, right? Like, unbelievably, people are paying me to sit around and talk to and talk to people. It's time for episode 11, right? And I come into work on Friday when you make sitcoms, there's a shoot on Friday. It's the long day with the cameras and the audience. Everybody's there. I know my week is going to start Monday. I come in on Friday and everyone's gloomy because not only has the show been canceled, the network has been canceled, right? The WB is closing. This is the day that they announced the WB is closing. So like, suddenly everyone's like, there is no episode 11. And I'm back to being like some guy from New York with nothing, right? And I'm like, oh, my career in Hollywood, my meteoric rise, I've been trashed, right? But sure enough, someone says, I've been thinking, you're so good at your job. Mind you, I've never done any work at all. You're so good at your job. There's a show starting up for kids, and I wonder if you'd like to go on. They need an acting coach. So it turns out this is the very first week of Hannah Montana, a show that featured the incomparable Billy Ray Cyrus and his daughter Miley.
So you are part of the beginning of.
I'm on the ground floor of Hannah Montana, right? And they have a need for me, which is Billy Ray is a performer and he's a star and he's a great guy and he's a singer. Billy Ray might not be so much of an actor, right? So you're just going to go, and for the first couple weeks, you'll help Billy Ray learn his lines.
Now, at this point, have you now forgotten about episode 11? Like, is that you're like, okay, whatever, I've now moved on?
Yeah, I mean, it's Hollywood.
It's kind of, you just
like,
kind of just, what's, okay.
There is no episode 11. Like, there is no episode 11. I can't really
mourn this anymore.
Like, what are you going to do?
I'm just going to move on to the next thing, and the next thing happens to be, coaching, providing acting lessons to Billy Ray Cyrus.
Right. Not even acting lessons. Right. I'm going to sit in his dressing room and help him learn his lines.
Okay. Got it.
Now, I remain to this day a devoted Billy Ray Cyrus fan, but Billy Ray was not that interested in acting, nor in learning his lines. And his lines weren't that hard. They were things like, hey, Hannah. Right. So like he walked through the kitchen. Right. But I was taking it really seriously. But I knew that this was because I'd already had this great experience, right? All you have to do is meet the right people and climb up the ladder. So I started deciding, how am I going to become a director on Hannah Montana? And the way you do this is attach yourself to the showrunner, this executive producer who's sitting while everyone's running around and the kids are doing their work. He sits in front of the video village. It's these television monitors all mounted on a cart. And like with old fashioned, just like you're imagining in a TV studio, director's chairs sort of in a line. And it's all lined up hierarchically. So at the front is the TV monitor, the most important thing there is. And then there's this showrunner and executive producer in two chairs. And the script lady stands right next to them, and right behind them are all the development people and all the associate producers, and then the writers. And then in the back, there's people like me, Billy Ray's acting coach.
So it's I guess I just didn't realize how hierarchical it is. Not that dissimilar to what it would be like in a corporate environment.
That's such a good observation. It's not dressed like a corporate organization, and the titles are so fuzzy because we're all creatives. The hierarchy is just as strict, right? There are things that an executive producer wears and says and does and where he sits that the showrunner doesn't do. And there are things that an associate producer wears and does and says, right, that are strict. So this hierarchy is very Los Angeles. Everyone's got a smile and nobody's in a suit. Not a single one of those people, right? We're all in tennis shoes. But it's just as strict.
So
right?
What would be a delineating piece of like clothing? You said that you maybe wear something different. Like, I'm just curious as to what that may look like.
On my very first day in Hollywood, I got dressed up to go to the lot, and I was wearing penny loafers and jeans with a white Oxford shirt and a baseball cap. And I came out getting ready to go to work to this guy whose house I was staying in, and he goes, "You can't wear that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "They're going to think you're a writer." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm shadowing the directors." And he was like, "You can't wear that. The button-down shirt, the collar on the Oxford, that makes you a writer. You can't wear that." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "No." So I went back and I got changed and I put on a coat because I thought I should look important like a director. So I changed my shirt, no buttons, put on a blue blazer, and came out, put socks on, and he was like, "No, you can't wear that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "If you have on that blazer, like the network people are going to be offended. They're going to think you're trying to take their job." I was like, "Okay, right." And I was like, "What should I wear?" And he was like, "The jeans are good. Put on tennis shoes. You want a t-shirt and you want a zipper hoodie. That makes you a director." And I was like, "Okay, right." I show up for the table read, and I swear to God, the costuming is perfect. It's what everybody's wearing. It's exactly right. And I'm like, okay, lesson learned, right? Lesson learned. There's a hierarchy here.
Okay.
Okay, so back to Hannah Montana, right? So essentially, I need to recreate the meteoric rise of the last 10 weeks. And I think as long as I'm, smart and nice people are going to help me. So I decide that in this first week of Hannah Montana, I am going to claw my way to the top of the video village, right? That I'm going to start in the back and I'm going to make helpful suggestions and make friends and get moved one step forward at a time until I'm whispering in the producer's ear. That's how I'm going to get episode 11 of Hannah Montana.
And at this time, you also don't have kind of your champion, if you will, right? So the guy who brought you in is nowhere to be seen. Is that right? Okay.
Not only nowhere to be seen, like there's not a person in this room who's ever heard of him, right? Like every sound studio is its own kingdom, right? So no one has any idea who I am. I'm just some guy, right? Like I'm just some like gay New York guy who's there like talking to Billy Ray about his lines, right? So week by week the pressure mounts, and when they shoot kids shows like that, they shoot them very, very fast. There's weird rules about how kids can work, but you work them really hard and you make a lot of episodes quick because they're going to grow up. And so, they can look really, really different by the time 3 months has passed, right? A little boy who's an adorable, high-pitched younger brother can turn into like a threatening thug in 6 months. So you got to work kids really, really hard and really, really fast to get episodes in the can. So it's like chaotic, right? And we're always standing at the video village and someone's always shooting something and you're never quite sure. So I'm making my way up the video village. I don't make any bad mistakes. I'm about halfway up in week 3. And suddenly it's rumored that Disney might come and buy Hannah Montana. And that means if they do, they're going to buy it on the scale of something epic, something important, like That's So Raven, right? They're going to like buy 200 episodes. If this happens, everyone in this room has work for the next 4 years, right? And if it's, knock wood, if it's That's So Raven, we're all getting rich.
And is that like for the not being kind of in the entertainment business, and is that what everyone there is striving for? Is that kind of, you know, commitment to a series? I mean, is that like gold? Is that?
Well, isn't that funny that we say everyone, and I'm suddenly very politically correct and want to say, like, I couldn't speak for everyone. But sure, that's like a lot of money, right? I mean, it's a lot of money, and you know, work in the industry is up and down. You know,
so there's some guarantee there.
Yeah, certainly for an actor, that's the holy grail. For the union jobs, you know, that's kind of how it works, right? Like you know, the union's placing you somewhere. You know, a crew that you work with. You hope you get a run out of it, right? You know, getting a whole season on a show is great. Getting 4, really great. So Disney's coming and they're going to buy it, and suddenly there's probably 50 more people a day on the set. So everyone's agent is showing up to stand at the Video Village, and all the kids' parents are showing up to stand at the Video Village, and all the other acting coaches are standing around the Video Village, and everyone is like muscling forward. And I kind of don't understand this because I've not been in that situation before. I just know it feels a lot more tense, and you know, the poor kids, like, they get shouted at a little bit more, and Billy Ray is like trying a lot harder, and it just feels more crowded. But I still am like, I'm making my way up the ladder of the Video Village, and I do this by making helpful suggestions. I'm a great actors director, so I can say things like, maybe they could do it at full speed, right? And the kids do it at full speed. It's a hit. It's hilarious. Move up a step at the Video Village, right? Then I say things like, I think the problem is the sweater, right? They take off the sweater. It's an amazing scene, and I win, right? I move up in the Video Village. So suddenly Disney's on set, and everyone is crazy uptight. And in fact, there's a whole second Video Village that's just for the Disney people. It's like there's another encampment on the other side. And so the showrunner and the producer are like focused on their Video Village, but they're always shooting looks over their shoulder across at the other Video Village. Are they laughing? Are they into it? Are they paying attention? Is it a mistake, right? They're looking. And you can feel that Disney's sort of like, it's much more organized, right? It's actually a very famous Disney television executive sitting in front. The director of children's programming was sitting in next to him, and then this like 3 straight rows of what you would call development girls, right? D girls who are like following scripts and having ideas, and they're gonna like evaluate it, but it's like really regimented, right? And this Disney executive is famously temperamental, and so now we're on like episode 6 maybe, and like the kids are working really hard, and this executive producer is really sweating. Like, not only does he need to sell this, but it turns out Disney could also choose to fire him from his own show. And the Disney guy is throwing in like mean notes. Like, he's like, it'll never work. Have her do this. I think it should be in Mississippi. Like crazy, like, you know. And there's like, it can't be in Mississippi. It's my show. Well, it needs to be in Mississippi. Like these crazy arguments, and I'm just watching, tossing in helpful comments and climbing ever further towards the front of the Video Village. So on the day that the decision is going to be made, somehow or other, Miley is dressed in a chicken suit, and she's parachuting back down to her high school in Malibu. So she's Hannah, disguised as a chicken, dropping into the high school in Malibu, where she'll have to go back to being Miley. So she's suspended in the air in a classic chicken suit, like you might think Lucy was, against a blue screen, and people are shouting directions at her to make it work. And it's a very awkward thing. And at the time she's 12 years old, so 13 maybe.
And she's in a chicken suit.
She's in a chicken suit, which is like not funny to a kid, right? They're like, "What? I'm in a chicken suit," right? So people have to coach, like, flap your wings, make like a bicycle, right? The big hit is swim, I say. So she starts with the breaststroke. Gales of laughter from everybody, right? And I'm emboldened, and I push my way forward in the Video Village, and I say, "Sing!" And she starts singing, bum, 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 and swinging back and forth. She's swimming, she's singing, she's swinging back and forth. Everybody goes crazy with laughter, and I'm thinking, this is it, right? And the showrunner bellows, "Stop!" And he stands up and he turns around and he goes, "What's that song?" Everyone goes quiet. It's my idea, and I'm king of the Video Village, so I say, "That is the Blue Danube Waltz by Richard Strauss." And he looks at me and goes, "Would you bet your life on it?" And I thought, okay, I heard Laverne and Shirley sing it one time, and they said it was Strauss, so I'm going to vote yes. Plus, I'm in Hollywood, who's going to know? So I said, yes. And he goes, "Is it in the public domain?" And I'm thinking, well, sure, it's Strauss. Like, it's got to be old. So, yes, it's in the, right? And then, and to this day, I can't tell you why. He points at me and he goes, "I want you off this set." And I go, but, and he goes, "Off the lot." And everyone recedes away from the Video Village like the tide pulling out. And I'm just standing there on this soundstage with everybody like staring at me and this man pointing at me and yelling, right? And then he sort of turns and starts yelling at everybody like, "Who are all these people? I want you gone. This is not, if you're not on set, you're not on," like just having this temper tantrum. And I'm thinking maybe it was just a tantrum, but sure enough, like in a movie, 2 security guards stand at either one of my shoulders. Someone hands me my bag, right? And they start walking me across the set and out towards the doors, right? The only person I know in the room is the script supervisor, and she says, "I have your jacket, don't worry." But they just keep walking me right out, right? And then, like in a movie or a television show, the big doors of the studio open and I'm flooded by bright Los Angeles sunlight, right? Like this, like a white beam of hot light with dust in it. And I'm thrust out into the parking lot of the studio, but they keep walking me all the way to my car, which they miraculously know where it is. And they're like, "Off the lot, sir." And I'm like, "Okay, I got it. Off the lot, sir." "Can I come back tomorrow?" "Off the lot, sir." "Am I fired?" "Off the lot, sir." I start the car, I start driving out. They walk out behind me in my car with the parking lot to the gate, right? Like the gate opens. The guy miraculously says, "You're off the lot, sir," right? I pull out, arm goes down, end of career, right? I'm like, end of career, right? I'm like, my meteoric rise, it's all over, right? So if I somehow had managed, right, I would be really rich and I would be a television director living in Hollywood and I would be friends with Miley Cyrus. But I had this moment where like I overstepped and everything like turned. And that was the end of my TV directing career.
2 questions.
Yeah.
Many questions, but 2.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is like fascinating, especially the visual of like everybody stepping aside. It was almost like, you are now like pariah, right?
Sure.
It's like,
yeah.
No one wants to like touch you, be near you. It's like, you have to now get out because if it's you, more than likely it's not now going to be me, right? So, but like in that kind of that sense of overstepping, like at what point now could you look back and say, like, where did you overstep? Where would you say that you overstepped?
So the overstep for me came in a lack of sensitivity for what that poor executive producer was going through that day. I misunderstood how important it is to have a network like Disney show up on your set. I had no real sense of the stakes of what 5 years of syndicated television might buy and pay for. I didn't know whether that was an important project for him creatively or not. Imagine, having one more shot in your career and having it be something that could be like life-changing for generations of kids, right? That may be how he was experiencing that day. And I was experiencing it like, oh my God, this crazy children's show with some like yokels who are the stars. And what can I do to get myself forward, right? The overstep there was that like I just had my own career firmly in mind and made me totally insensitive to like the real stakes for real people in what's arguably a ridiculous business. Mm-hmm. But the reality, like the insensitivity to his reality, that's actually an overstep. And when I say it, I actually feel regretful.
Well,
Like,
I guess and would you just say, because it's, I worked in a creative business. I worked in advertising for many years.
Sorry.
No, well, actually, in retrospect, it actually turned out it was pretty well. Didn't always feel that way when we were in it, but would you say? Because I'm just curious about the moment. Would you say that he just felt upstaged by the fact that what your suggestions, like you were actually maybe providing things that he couldn't see and wouldn't provide? Because this is an interesting topic that happens a lot in creative businesses. Sure. So was it the fact that you didn't realize that it was at stake, or was it the fact that he was sitting there thinking, oh my God, this person has better ideas than I did at the time, and that it's now I'm feeling threatened by that. So I don't know. I'm just I recognize the observation.
I actually never saw anything on that set that looked like that. I saw people working really hard and collaborating. I actually saw kids having a lot of fun. I really think that the nuance, though, is there are some days when that creativity is a threat, right? Like, even in a creative business, there are some days where just like doing the business and marking the time is what's important, and it's brilliant, it's funny, it's creative is not what's important, right? And if you can't follow that, like doing the right thing at the wrong time is a threat, right? Like,
well, that's what I'm wondering.
I didn't ever feel him as insecure or threatened by me at all, except that like the situation was so intense, and like, who's this guy like shouting out ideas while I'm trying to sell $100 million project, right? Like, shut up. Like, you're fucking up my sale, right? Like, right? It's like, today's not the day for creative.
Yeah. So was it timing? So it was timing. That's I mean, I think
it's the secret of comedy.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that I think is also, but I think it's also the secret of business too. Like, sometimes you have to know when to push on something, and sometimes you have to know when to pull back. And that's why I just wanted to poke around in that a little bit, just for listeners who are in different business environments. It's, how do you be mindful of that? Then I guess the second question. So just kind of as you were being kind of dismissed in what was a very theatrical way, I mean, at that point, like, was there any chance at all your like TV career, albeit was at this point, a couple months old, like, was it ever going to be saved, or was that just like, was there any way of coming back from that, or did you not want to, or I guess what kind of happened next for you after that?
So it's really important to know in that moment that it was completely over, right? I was actually a stranger in that town. I had burned through all my connections in my meteoric rise of the first 10 weeks, right? People had been so kind to me. There had been another really interesting development. This was the year that My Name is Earl premiered, and it gutted multi-camera sitcoms. There was this change in Earl. They used one camera, and it was much more like a movie. But that meant everyone who worked in multi-camera suddenly had no jobs because they didn't make any more multi-camera shows for a while. Everything was single camera. So all those people that helped me were suddenly out of jobs, and they were like, "Help you? I need a job, kid," right? Everything switched. So in the moment that I shared with you, I literally was like blinded by the white hot Los Angeles sun and sucking in the dust of the Hollywood freeway and knowing like, this is it. Like, get a job waiting tables, right? Or go home to New York. But what did happen, remember the girl who said, "I have your coat." She called me 2 weeks later with, "I have your coat," and got me another acting coaching job on another show. And I I began a much more reasonable exploration of what it meant to be a director in television, which I did.
You did?
Yeah,
Oh,
I did
okay.
for a little while.
So it wasn't really, it wasn't the end.
It wasn't, but it sure seemed like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other final words of wisdom for our listeners or a lesson to take forward for our listeners?
No, I think what I like about me in the story that I just told you is the bravery that goes on the same side as the like sort of insensitivity, right? That I showed up in Hollywood with a little bit of help and I said yes to every single thing. And that takes bravery. And that day of like throwing out suggestions and climbing, I don't regret that I threw out the suggestions. I really don't. I regret that I was insensitive to the moment, but it was brave of me to keep going and keep swinging and keep saying like, I want to try it. I'm here to help. I want to try it. I'm here to help. One way to play it is all political. The other way to play it is brave. And I am happy that I played it brave there.
Dave Mowers, thank you very much for being on Not Suitable for Work.
Thank you.
If you ever get fired, it's not the end of the world. You learn from it and move on. I can say this because I was fired from a small branding consultancy after working there for just 3 dreadful months in the late 1990s. In my situation, it wasn't a good fit. I knew it and they knew it. Nonetheless, I was devastated. I didn't sleep for 3 days, and after my pity party was over, I started working my network and quickly found another job that was a good fit and reignited my career. P.S. Not that I'm bitter, but said branding consultancy went belly up a few years later. Ha! If you want more Not Suitable for Work or have a work story to share, be sure to follow us on Facebook at Not Suitable for Work. You can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or wherever you find your podcast. If you have a question you want answered on a future episode, call us at 872-256-0827 and leave us a message. I'm Peter C. Diamond. You can follow me on Twitter at Peter C. Diamond. Not Suitable for Work is produced by Matt Cunningham at Truthful Enthusiasm. Get your story online with truthfulenthusiasm.com. Until next time,